Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about the new Superman movie and the new Fantastic Four movie once again. But I'm going to talk about them in analysis more of their promotion than anything else and to see how it plays into this quote unquote progressive woke mentality. Now, you may be saying to yourself, I've seen both the new Superman movie and the new Fantastic Four movie. They don't seem quote unquote progressive woke to me. Okay, well, here's the point. If they weren't woke to begin with, why was all of the promotion around these movies being released statements from directors, writers, actors over and over again pushing a quote unquote progressive angle? That's more the question that I think needs to be asked. We'll set aside for a moment whether or not the actual movies are quote unquote progressive, quote unquote woke. Now, I would maintain personally, keeping with the videos that I've done for at least 4 or 5 years now, that when progressivism, quote unquote, gets to be on the back foot, it's going to return to what it used to do in, let's say, the 90s, wherein it put all of the message that they want to portray in this progressive way underneath so that it's very, very subtle. But one way or another, whether you think it is or whether you think it isn't, we still have to answer the question, then why did they promote it as such? Because you had James Gunn saying things like, it's not truth, justice in the American way anymore, it's truth, justice in the human way. Or you have the actors from Fantastic Four, the one who plays Johnny Storm saying, he's not a womanizer anymore, that's an outdated concept and toxic masculinity. When that doesn't actually seem to be the case in the movie. Or you have the person who's playing Sue Storm, Sue Richards, saying, well, she's not this meek, outdated trope that you get within the older stories. And again, this is from multiple people who have worked on these movies. Why are they promoting it as such if that's not going to be the way it is in the movie, or at the very least, not in your face that way in the movie? Well, there are several possibilities that I can come up with off the top of my head. Number one being they're trying to eat their cake and have it too. They want to promote it as if it's a progressive movie. And then once it actually comes out, the normies will say, it's really not that progressive, and therefore the word of mouth from the normies will get normies to go see it, whereas the woke people will say, well, yeah, it is woke according to the advertisements for it and the people who made it, therefore I'm going to see it. My problem with that is that it's based upon them thinking about actual numbers and actual promotion in the way it's supposed to be done. And if you look at those numbers, if you look at how people go see the movies, you'll realize that quote unquote progressive people don't go see movies. They don't actually consume the entertainment that they keep asking for. And you would make more money if you not only made a woke-free movie, but also if you promoted it as a woke-free movie. So I think that possibility is out. There is also the possibility that these people aren't themselves quote-unquote progressive. They just want to portray the movie in that way because they work in Hollywood and they don't want to get canceled, but they're still going to make a good movie, and therefore that's why they portrayed it in this way, but didn't actually make the movie in this way. And I would say, looking at the actual people, that's probably not the case. These people are probably straight through quote unquote progressive. You look at someone like Pedro Pascal and you try to argue that he's not a quote unquote progressive person. I don't think that's going to fly. Now, I would maintain it is this third way that I'm going to describe. And yes, it is the most complicated by far of the ways that I'm going to describe, but I don't think Occam's razor actually works here, and I'll explain that at the end, connecting the entire thing together. I think that what you see within the promotion of these movies is an expression of the narcissism that generally goes along with your quote-unquote progressivism. And by the way, I think the connection of those two things has been going on for quite some time now. I've actually done videos about that for at least 5 years, but I do think there is a subtle shift in how they do it right now. Now, before I go any farther, I want to say a couple of things about labeling people narcissists. I really, really don't like to do that. That's partly why I'm not going to actually say a specific person is X, but we're going to talk generally here. However, I'll give you my reasons why I don't like to do that. Number one, because narcissist is the term that is way overused in our society. It's becoming so overused that it's becoming useless as an actual term. So much so that I've seen videos of people saying, well, you don't have to actually know if they're a narcissist or not, or have them diagnosed as such. If you feel that way, that's what they are. That makes a complete mockery of the entire medical examination of this problem. Number two comes out of that, which is the fact that actually diagnosing someone as a narcissist is an extremely difficult thing to do, as far as I understand it. So for people on the internet to willy-nilly destroy others' lives by calling them by this term, I think is very, very, again, destructive. And number three, one of the reasons why it is very destructive is because an actual narcissist can use the exact things they're talking about to declare normal people to be narcissists and then use that to destroy their lives. And I'll add to number four being that I don't typically like to talk about things in psychological terms. I would think that if we go back to the 2,400-year tradition of actually analyzing the psyche, which is to say the soul, because that's what the word means, that goes through philosophy and logic and theology, we have much more of a rich history of understanding and describing what this fault within human beings is, and use terms that would be historically used to describe these actions and their outcomes. Things like virtue and vice, things like pride and self-centeredness. However, that all being said, I am going to use the current scientific terms and to drag in as much as possible those older, ancient, and medieval terms used to describe this kind of actions and this kind of thinking and behavior, while at the same time, as I said, not declaring any one individual X or Y, except to say that I think that this promotion of these movies was done through a spirit of narcissism. And that if you look at it as such, you can use that as an analytical tool in order to determine whether or not the movies have a subtle hint or tinge or underlying message of this quote-unquote progressivism in the background. And a further caveat of, I'm just giving you my 2 cents here. Feel free to say in the comments, I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So, the problem with not only narcissists, but a lot of people in the general vicinity of that psychological disorder, I don't know what it is, group B and group C, basically different kinds of personality disorders. One of the general problem, if not a general problem among them all, is the fact that they don't have the ability to control their own emotions and process them correctly in a healthy way. And because they don't actually have the ability to do so, what they do is they seek an external control over their emotions. So that is to say, they don't have any internal control, therefore they try to make an external control through sometimes use of other people or other institutions, etc. And oh, by the way, this control doesn't actually work very well. That's why they need to get more and more and more control. Now, you can see why this entire thing might play into the mindset of progressivism in several ways. Number one, if you think that progressives are people who are tending towards a more and more authoritarian state all the time, you'd be correct. You'd be correct because a lot of these people underneath don't have the ability to process internally what they need and are seeking external validation and processing, which again is not a very well-oiled machine of dealing with things. And so that control needs to become more and more. Number two, this also plays into their turning our culture back into a shame culture, which is something I've done probably a half a dozen videos about. Our culture, like it or not, based for almost 2,000 years on Christianity, has been a majority guilt culture, whereas the ancient culture was a shame culture, and they're trying to turn it into a neo-pagan way back into a shame culture. Why? Because in a guilt culture, what you typically do is you internalize the rules of right and wrong, and those rules of right and wrong, by the way, should be set upon reality and be drawn out from reality. And yes, such a thing can be done. I did an entire video about that. If you don't think that reality can dictate the rules of morality, then you're using a logical fallacy wherein you are assuming that a person is an abstract thing like a square or a circle rather than a dynamic thing which grows and changes and completes himself. But again, not going into that entire argument because I've done that before. But the point being, in a guilt culture, you internalize those rules which are from reality. And when you do something wrong, you point your finger at yourself and say, I need to change. I need to actually do something about myself, which again is something that these people who don't have emotional control can do, because they can't point the finger at themselves, because if they did that, they would look internally and not have the ability to control the chaos that would then ensue. And quite honestly, if they tried to do that, their fragile psyche would most probably shatter. Therefore, they opt for a shame culture. A shame culture is where when you do something wrong, if you get caught, society will point its finger at you and say, you did something wrong, you have to change. Now, here's the interesting thing. The flip side of that entire shame culture is that if you can't process your emotions, you have a very close and ready instrument for you to become part of that society, which then points your finger at people and say, you're the problem. And this is what emotionally immature people do all the time. Because they don't have the ability to control their own emotions and to have any internal reflection, the way that they control their emotions is to point their finger at other people and say, this is all your problem. This has nothing to do with me. That way, they don't have to take responsibility and to some extent mitigate the damage internally of taking responsibility for their violation of rules of reality. Or should I say, the breaking of the rules that reality convicts them of. And this leads into the third thing. Again, they're trying to bring back a neo-paganism because that entire process anciently would be known as scapegoating. It would be, well, most notably in Jewish culture, where the people would place all of their sins upon a goat or some other like animal so that that animal would take on all of their sins. Then they would drive it out into the desert where it would die. And therefore, the scapegoat actually took away all of their sins. And as a small aside here, yes, I find it extremely funny that they want to go back to the pre-Christian way of doing things because the whole point of the crucifixion was indeed scapegoating in a sense because it was the Lamb of God taking on the sins of everyone for all time. Which again, if these people want to go back to scapegoating, is internally and maybe even externally another rejection of Christianity, which they hate. Now, here's the point where I bring it back to, finally, the trailers and the promotion for the two movies of Superman and Fantastic Four, and how they tie into a narcissistic mindset. The difference between a narcissist and all of the other people who have similar kind of personality disorders is that a narcissist typically likes to scapegoat other people and actually gains pleasure out of watching other people suffer under his own emotional chaos that he places upon them. It gives the narcissist supposedly an extra sense of control and superiority, thinking to themselves, well, you see, I have a process to get rid of all of those negative emotions that works spectacularly well, whereas it's crushing you, ha ha, I'm better than you. Now, back to the movies. I think I can safely assume that there just might be a little bit of narcissism in Hollywood. And that the promotion of these movies, very specifically Superman 25 and the Fantastic Four movie, First Steps, their promotion is done in this narcissistic sense wherein you have these people who are making these statements, which are sometimes, it seems, completely false, which, by the way, is one of the things that narcissists do. They tend to be pathological liars. But they're lying in this way, portraying it to be an ultra-woke movie and that these characters will do X, Y, and Z when that doesn't happen because they enjoy the chaos and the anger that erupts from them saying such things. And more than that they're employing this sort of tactic to quite simply rage bait people into watching the movie. I quite honestly think that what I have just described is the process of rage baiting to a T, and it has been going on for quite some time now. This is why on my channel, I try not to label individuals or call out individuals specifically, although I do have to at some point, but I try not to do it as much as possible because I think people like Richard over at Comics Matter is just playing into the hands of these people by covering them over and over again. And by calling them out specifically over and over again, he's doing the exact thing that they want him to do, which is to get upset at their actions because they purposely do these things to make other people upset and thus feel superior in a way that gets rid of, in part, their emotional turmoil. Now, you may be saying to yourself, you just took a whole lot of time explaining something that you could have explained within 5 seconds by just saying this entire thing is rage bait. And if you're thinking that, I would say, no, I analyzed it in order to use it as a specific tool to analyze further things, and did so specifically so I could be more specific. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to my observation at the first that yes, this is the most complicated way of thinking about it, but I don't think Occam's razor applies here. Why? Because people who are narcissistic are very intricate and devious in this way. Why and how? Well, because, again, since they are not able to control their emotions, they don't like to spend a whole lot of time in their brain in the emotional center. So, in order to do that, typically they overthink. Now, here's the thing. The overthinking part of your brain is also the logical part of your brain, but that's not to say that every overthinker is a logical thinker. You can be overthinking with massively illogical things over and over again, which I would attest if you're a progressive, this is what you do. So again, the process is they're extremely unhappy people. Since they're extremely unhappy people, they don't like to spend time with their emotions. Since they don't like to spend time with their emotions, they abandon that part of their brain, which is the center of emotion. In order to do so, they move forward into the frontal cortex, I think it is, where the higher levels of intricacy and logic are actually based, and they become overthinkers. In so overthinking, they create these intricate patterns, sometimes based upon massive falsities, in order for them to get rid of all of the harmful feelings that they feel within them, in order for them to feel better about the fact that they have no emotional control. And by the way, just as a small aside here, if you're thinking to yourself, RJ, I think you just described yourself, I try and have a very healthy emotional life as well. Just to let you know. Have a great time with John every Wednesday on my live stream, and with other people in real life as well. But back to the point. The point is that, yes, these people are very specific in what they do for a very specific reason. They are very devious, conniving, and can plan very well, because that's part of their survival mechanism. And that's why, in part, they want to take over and have a knack for taking over entertainment, because entertainment can be based upon intricate patterns of description. And again, you may be saying to yourself, you're really reaching. But I would point back to my entire catalog, especially the thing I talk about a lot lately, the Zoom call from the Writers Guild of America, which was gold, and was about 2 hours long, maybe 2.5 hours long, I think. So there was a lot of stuff there, where you had a showrunner actually describe a conversation that they had with one of the higher ups that they were working at one time, talking about the subtle and decade-long process of how they took over the entertainment industry in order to insert the rainbow flag message into everything, describing how they literally started out as, well, we'll enter this into the minds of people with humor. And then that rainbow flag person will become the best friend of the main character. Then they will become one of the supporting cast characters. Then they will become, where we are right now, one of the main characters. Then they will become, as they see in the future, every character being part of the Rainbow Coalition, which is part of what you see on these shows, like the new Ironheart show. So this is not me coming up with these things out of my hat. This is me describing to you a process which they themselves, when they're talking to other people of their own ilk and talk freely, are saying, yeah, yes, of course, we took decades in order to long haul through the institution of entertainment to get this entire message through there, and now we're in control with it. But again, the point being, if indeed the promotion of these movies are based upon rage bait, why, you have to ask, why is the rage bait very specifically in this quote-unquote progressive way? Because you can rage bait in an entirely different number of ways. And I would assert it is because, well, first of all, it's kind of like Donald Trump's art of the deal. First of all, you walk into the room and demand something ridiculous and crazy, so that when you back off the ridiculous and crazy, you actually get exactly what you want, instead of walking into the room saying, this is what I want, and having to back down from that and getting less. So they're walking into the promotion of the movie, Superman and Fantastic Four, saying ridiculous things, ridiculous woke and progressive things, so that when it actually comes out and people say, oh, it's not actually that progressive or woke, they get to underhandedly still sell you all of those ideas underneath by simply, again, going back to the way they used to do it, which was part of their long march through the institutions. Because there's been some pushback. They're on the back foot. They've had to take a couple of step backs in their march through the institution. And so the point is, don't be fooled. If you're thinking in the back of your mind, hey, wait a minute, was that just a progressive message there and I took it in? Don't say to yourself, nah, it's not that kind of a movie. No, don't second guess yourself. You need to give validation to that kind of thinking and say, yeah, it most probably was. And don't think that you got yourself a good deal and good entertainment just because they backed off of crazy. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there is a link in the description for the sign-up page for my new book called Fade to Blue. If you go to that sign-up page, you can watch the trailer for the book. You can look at some of the art, and if you wish, you can leave your email address so you can be informed when the project goes live. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see y'all later. Bye.